to me, my success has been attributed to the fact that I have given up on refraining from being who I am.
Mm.
And I have really gotten to know what my strengths are and how I can use those strengths to make me money and to do great work like this.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of ADHDers fall short. It's it's like the good news is that we have this way of operating, and you don't have to learn how to be normal.
Mm.
You have your strengths, like start to learn how to use your strengths to your advantage.
Yeah.
When you have a negative response and you have this gold, you have a picture of it, or you have a word to remind you, so that when the negative emotion comes up or the negative thought, you have this picture of you and your grandchild, or you getting a standing ovation, or you doing the marathon thing, whatever it is, this picture immediately ignites positive emotion.
Mm. That's great. That positive emotion that ignites you and makes you feel alive. I really like that. Just out of curiosity, what are the things that make you feel alive?
Well, one of the biggest ones is fairness. I'm sure you can relate. I can't stand people being treated. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always the one that stuck up for the kids that were being bullied or taken advantage of. So fairness is a huge one for me, and so is love, kindness.
And he said, make the sincere intention and do the work. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit better, because it's like, make the intention, make the goal as to what you want to do, and then do the work. Okay, that's better. But there's still a step missing for an ADHDer. So I created the formula for ADHD success. Make the sincere intention, or make that goal, plus find the right structure and support for your brain so that you can do the work, so that you can just do it. You got to have those elements. You got to find what you need, whether it's those champions, whether it's like, certain ways of doing things, the way you set up your desk, making sure you're not late by having, things in place so that you are able to get to that place on time, however that looks for each person. Those are the elements that are important.
Kind of one question I have as we kind of move more into the interview portion. What's been your key to success? I know a lot of people with ADHD struggle with this idea of success. What does it mean? How do I get there? And what's your key to success? And then how do you try and make that approachable for people with ADHD?
So I would say the key to success is do it. I think a lot of people with ADHD, they get so anxious about doing it because they're afraid they're going to act impulsively. And so then they ruminate about it. And so to come up with a plan, come up with an intention, and then do it. In coaching, we see people as creative, resourceful, and whole. So I'm working with someone, I'm looking at who they are as a person and what makes them wonderful. And I think that they can learn to bring that to the world and makes the world a better place.
It's funny to me how some people will be like, well, yeah, I wasn't very ADHD when I was younger, but as an adult, like that's when I got ADHD. And I think, oh, you've got so much to learn. Because obviously, with Alex and I being people of faith, God built us in a certain way. And so our brains have always been wired that way. And it wasn't until high school when I got diagnosed that I learned what that meant. And like so many other people, when the doctor was reading through the description of like what ADHD is, it felt such a massive sense of relief, because it was like, wow, so I wasn't doing it wrong the whole time. Like I still get emotional even just telling the story now, because so many of us with ADHD, we feel like we're less than, or we're broken, or we need to be fixed. And unfortunately, we are in a world that isn't built for us. And so it was really validating to hear what the symptoms were, because I'm like, yes, that's me. Like it's not that I'm not trying. I just, it's not, things aren't clicking for me as much.
And to this day, it's 10% curse, but it's 90% gift. And everyone can get to this. It's just a matter of working little systems, your crazy systems, and then other hacks and strategies on a regular basis. But I just realized that I was working all these strategies that were just helping me. And I had my job, so I was making a lot of money in the advertising business. It was great. I was working at a New York ad agency. That's my third agency at that time. And I thought, this stuff, there's no video out there. That now there are lots of videos now. There was nothing back in 2009, 10 when I had the idea, because the only thing there was then was like books. When there's nothing wrong with books. I've written a book, but for adults with ADHD, you kind of want a book that has some pictures in it.
And not be a part of the problem, but be a part of the solution. And everyone I coach and every time I meet with others, I learn from their experiences. And I've realized this, I'm going to end my story, because my story doesn't end, right? My story rolls out every day and will continue to roll out every day. My story ends with realizing that being in this community of ADHDers, being at the conferences, being a coach, and other stuff I'm working ADHD Unshamed, which we'll mention, that it's not just my passion, it's my purpose. At 60 years old, a couple of years prior, really, I discovered my true north, as they say, my true purpose. And this is it. I wake up every morning with such joy. Can't wait to get to my desk to work. What can I do today?
I could tell you, oh, I think it's going to take an hour or half an hour, but I'm probably going to be wrong, and then you're going to be frustrated with me. So if you ask me how long something is going to take, I'm not going to allow myself to be put in a position where I try to guess. I'm just going to say I don't know, because that is frankly the truth. And I can be somewhere within a range of time. So I'll tell someone, okay, yeah, I'll be there between 7 and 8, but I'm not going to tell somebody I'll be there at 7.
And to get a little more specific, so growing up, I was constantly not in class. And the reason is because I was either in detention or I was in the gifted and talented classroom, which was, as you can imagine, very confusing. Proved to be very confusing for the rest of my life, because it was like, okay, so am I special? Am I a bad kid? And it was kind of hard to reconcile both of those things, because I think there was some truth to both of it. I mean, I was definitely very disruptive and hyperactive as a kid. I mean, in a lot of ways, I was a little bit of a problem child. Luckily, it never, I never went down like a road of getting into, real troublemaking or getting in trouble with the law or anything like that, as a lot of us do. I was very fortunate in that sense, but also maybe it's because I had a little bit of that grounding from.
First of all, I don't know if you know this, but I'm an African-American male, grew up in the 90s. You weren't almost allowed to have ADHD at that time, especially like in the communities that I worked with. It wasn't even in the lexicon, I may have had like a general concept of ADHD, but in my head, it was kind of like, young, rich, white kids that were kind of kicking and screaming. And so a lot of the beginning of it was me getting in trouble in school or having such promise and brilliance in certain ways, but for whatever reason, he would just drop the ball somewhere. And I would hear that story throughout my entire early shot.
To do, I didn't know how to explain it. It was symbolic of me going into my brain. And that's a real sign of inattentive ADHD, just being inside my brain. Now, growing up through school, there were signs. I remember one time working ahead because I was so bored in class, getting called on to answer the next problem we were working on the worksheet together. And I answered the one they just did. I got in trouble for not paying attention, when really I was doing the work. I was just ahead of everyone. That same teacher wrote on my report card that I had the potential to do well in school, but that I just needed to try harder. And I think that was a message I got in school a lot, was just try harder. And I also remember things like sitting in class, looking directly at the teacher, getting instructions from the teacher on the next activity, and then everyone starting to do the thing and me going, oh crap, what are we supposed to do? So I'd have to turn to the next person and go, what they say? Even though I was there in the moment. So that forgetfulness, sloppy handwriting, always being told that I needed to work on my handwriting. There were signs.